Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's day 3 for third grade, and this is week 4. And we are talking still about SOL 3.6F, which has to do with summarizing nonfiction. Okay, so today we're really going to be working on um, reading something that's nonfiction and then writing a good summary. So we're going to start picking apart what are those most important details, and then we're going to really hone in on starting to write our summary. Okay, so your objective for today is I can identify the most important parts of a nonfiction text using a graphic organizer. Whoops, sorry about that. So again, it's really important that you talk about the most important parts. Okay, that's really what I want you to hone in on, okay? Most important parts of a graphic organizer. I mean of a story using a graphic organizer. So today we're going to read a new passage, and this one is actually really cool because it is related to what's going on in the world right now. So the title of this, I called it Robot Nurse, but it says Tommy the Robot Nurse helps Italian doctors care for coronavirus patients. So you can see right here, based on the picture and based on the title of this article, we're going to be talking about this little guy right here who is a robot that's helping with the care of coronavirus patients. So I think that's really cool and something that you guys probably would be interested about hearing about. I think it's kind of cool. I liked reading it. So you should be able to access your own copy and print it out if you want and read it, or you can read along with me. Um, Whatever is easier for you if you don't have a printer. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that you can read along with me as I'm reading, okay? So I'm just going to start right here at the top where it says sometimes, and we're going to continue on together, and then we will go on to the next part together to answer some questions and start filling in a graphic organizer. All right, so sometimes doctors and nurses need help. At one hospital in Italy, they are getting help from Tommy, a robot nurse. Tommy is one of 6 robots helping doctors and nurses in Italy. They take care of coronavirus patients. The coronavirus is an illness like the flu. It began in China. It has been spreading around the world since December 2019. The robots work at the Circulo Hospital in Italy. There have been many cases of the coronavirus nearby. And so then here's a heading, and it kind of got cut off from this page, but that's okay. Child size with large eyes. That's the heading. The robots are the size of a child. They have large eyes that blink. They are wheeled into rooms and left by a patient's bed. That allows doctors to look after others who are in more serious condition. Gianni Brunelli is in charge of the Circolo Hospital. He described the robot's features. The robot has a screen and a computer. Patients can talk to nurses and doctors through the robot. So here's the robot again. Robots can check on patients' health. They do not replace people, Bonelli said. Patients count on people, he said. We know how important it is for them, he said. The robots let doctors and nurses have fewer visits with patients. Fewer visits could make them less likely to get the coronavirus. The robots also do not need masks or gowns. That saves them for other workers. Fighting the coronavirus is a big job. That is why medical workers need help. Still, it takes a while for patients to see the robots are good. Francesco Dentali is a doctor in the hospital. He said you have to explain to the patient how a robot helps. So this heading is some do not like it. Some do not like it, he said, but if you explain your aim, the patient is happy because he or she can speak with the doctor, he said. More than 4,000 Italian health workers have gotten the virus. 66 doctors have died. There have not been enough masks and other things to protect them. Tommy is the name of the son of the doctor at the hospital. Health workers are not going home after work. They want to avoid spreading the virus to their families. Bonelli said that the doctor said at least there is someone that can call. I'm sorry. Bonelli said that the doctor said he at least there is someone that he can call by his son's name. It is a way for the doctor to feel at home, he said. Tommy and other robot nurses have one more advantage. They do not get tired. After a charge of batteries, they are back at work. All right. So I thought that was very interesting that the robot was able to talk to the patient, well, the patient was able to talk through the robot, and that they kind of monitored how the patient was doing. And we know that with coronavirus, you don't want to be in contact with people who have it. So it helps the nurses and the doctors stay healthier and, kind of gives the patients an opportunity to have a robot there to check on them if the doctor or the nurse can't be there, okay, because they're really, really busy. So I think that's really interesting. That was an interesting story to read. So now that we have read that, and of course you can pause the video, you can go back and read it on the video screen or on the paper if you've printed it out. Remember, reading and rereading are super, super important when you're taking a test or when you're reading a book. Making sure that you understand what is being said is of utmost importance. So if you have to go back and reread, that is great. I encourage it. So before we move on, there are some questions attached to this. As you can see, questions 1, 2, 3, and 4. I'm actually not going to focus on those questions. They're great questions, and it's so important to have, comprehension of what you've read. So I encourage you to still answer those questions. But honestly, I want to focus on just summarizing what we read. So we're going to use a graphic organizer here in a minute to organize our thoughts and to summarize what we just read. So this graphic organizer should be linked, and you should be able to print it out and write on it. And this is a little bit different than a graphic organizer we used earlier in the week, but that's okay. It's a little different, but it still works. So this graphic organizer has you list what the topic is, what the main idea is, and then a summary. Okay, so what we're going to do to be able to fill out this graphic organizer is first figure out what's one word that maybe two words. We can maybe use two words, okay, that we would use to describe what is this talking about. And then main idea is just one sentence that talks about what the whole passage is about, not a minor detail. We want to talk about the big picture, okay, in just one sentence. And then the summary is one paragraph that includes the main idea and the topic, but it also includes some key details, some things that are really important in that story that we just read. So in order to do this, I have created a document here that I'm going to go ahead and type in so that you can follow along with me. So for the topic, we're going to change this to 2 words because I think 2 words is better. Okay. What 2 words do you think we could use to say what the topic is, the general broad idea? So we're talking about robots, but what kind of robots doing what, being what? I think these 2 words right here really are a nice topic. So for topic, I'm going to write robot nurse. Okay, because that's what the passage is talking about. That's the general idea. Now, we don't get anything specific about robot nurse. We don't know yet what specifically they're talking about with the topic, but at least we know that we're going to be reading about a robot that's a nurse. Okay? So then for main idea, we want to get a little more specific here. This is the statement that sort of encapsulates everything that the passage is talking about. So when we go back here, we don't want to pick out a specific detail. We want to find a sentence or create a sentence that will speak to what the whole passage is about. Okay? So, um, I see a kind of good sentence out. It's really two sentences, but we can kind of make it into one sentence that works in here. In this very first part, I also would love for you to create your own sentence because that's really shows me that you understand what you read. I think that the title is a great main idea sentence. So it says Tommy the robot nurse helps Italian doctors care for coronavirus patients. That's what this whole thing is about, right? It's talking about coronavirus patients and how they're being helped in Italy by this robot nurse named Tommy. Okay, so I'm going to use this exact wording right here that is the title as your main idea sentence. So I'm just going to go ahead and type it in. Tommy the robot nurse. And it's okay to go back and check helps Italian doctors care for coronavirus patients. And that's your sentence. Make sure you capitalize that first letter and that you put a period at the end to make sure that you have a complete sentence there. Tommy the robot nurse helps Italian doctors care for coronavirus patients. Okay, that's what the whole passage is talking about, right? So now we have our topic and our main idea. And here's where we're going to start deciding what are some important details. So I want you to pause the video and I want you to go back to the passage that we read together. And I want you to pull out some important ideas. And your ideas might be different than someone else's ideas a little bit, okay? Because everybody's summary might be a little bit different. There's a lot of information in here, so you may not pull out the same exact important information, and that's okay. But we want to make sure that we're not focusing on small details, that we're picking out the most important things. So pause the video right here and go back and find me 3 important details. That's what I want. 3 important details from the passage. If you have a highlighter, you can highlight, or if you just have a pencil or a pen, you can underline, and then we'll come back together. All right. So in this passage, I am noticing that there's a heading right here that says some do not like it. There's a heading that says child size with large eyes. And then there's this in the beginning, which is sort of your introduction. So I'm going to take one sentence from each of those sections as my most important detail. Okay, so for the very first part, it talks about how Tommy's a robot nurse and he's helping the doctors and the nurses in Italy, and he's caring for coronavirus patients. And then it talks about how the coronavirus is like the flu and where it began. Okay. And then what hospital that Tommy's been working at. So what I'm going to do is, I'm sorry, what I'm going to do is go back to my summary here. And the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this main idea sentence word for word and type it into my summary. Okay, because we want to talk about what the most important thing is, and this is what the whole passage is about. So I'm going to retype this right into my summary as my first sentence. Now, a paragraph is usually 4 to 5 sentences. So if we have one main idea sentence, and then a sentence from each section that's important, and then a little closing sentence, that's 5 sentences right there. So it's pretty easy to write a summary paragraph there. So in that very first paragraph, I think that it's important to say that it's at a hospital in Italy that they're getting help from this robot nurse because the doctors and nurses need help. So I'm going to put that in my own words because remember, that is part of making a good summary is putting it into your own words. Okay. So I'm going to take that information that we just read and I'm going to put it in my own words. I'm going to say, Tommy helps the doctors and nurses in an Italian hospital because there are many patients with coronavirus. Okay, so I just kind of took that information and made it into my own new sentence. So I talked about the hospital that he's at and the fact that there are many patients with coronavirus. Okay, and right here it says there have been many cases of coronavirus nearby. So that I kind of put that into my own words. Let's move on to the next section. This is child size with large eyes. So this talks about what the robot looks like. Okay, so let's go back and reread this. The robots are the size of a child. They have large eyes that blink. They are wheeled into rooms and left by a patient's bed that allows doctors to look after others who are in a more serious condition. Gianni Bonelli is in charge of the 3rdELA hospital. He described the robot's features. The robot has a screen and a computer. Patients can talk to the nurses and doctors through the robot. Robots can check on patients' health. They do not replace people, Bonelli said. Patients count on people. We know how important it is for them, he said. The robots let doctors and nurses have fewer visits with patients. Fewer visits could make them less likely to get the coronavirus. The robots also do not need masks or gowns and saves them for other workers. Fighting the coronavirus is a big job. That is why medical workers still need help. Still, it takes a while for patients to see that robots are good. Francesco Dentali is a doctor at the hospital. He said you have to explain to the patient how a robot helps. Okay, so there's actually quite a few important things in there. So if you wanted to pull out 2 important things from that passage, I think that would be great. So some of you might have pulled out the information about what the robot looks like. Which is good, and I wouldn't say that's wrong, but I might focus on this part that says patients can talk to nurses and doctors through the robot, and that the robots can check on the patient's health. I think that's really important because that tells me how does the robot work? What is the robot doing to help? So I'm going to go back to my graphic organizer, and I'm going to write in my own words, the robot helps doctors and nurses by checking on the patients and allowing the patient to talk to doctors through the robot. That's kind of a long sentence, but that's okay. It helps the doctors by checking on the patient's health and also allowing the patient to talk through the robot. So that's the sentence I wrote here. Okay. And you can copy exactly what I have if you didn't have a good sentence for that. Okay. And then something else that I think is important, right here where it says, fewer visits could make them less likely to get the coronavirus, and robots don't need masks and gowns. I think that's really important. So I'm going to put that in my own words and say the robot allows nurses and doctors to limit the amount of time spent with patients. Okay, so that's important because remember, coronavirus is very serious and people can get it by being in contact with someone who has it. Okay, so let's move on to the very last section. Some do not like it. So I'm going to read this again. Some do not like it, he said, but if you explain your aim, the patient is happy because he or she can speak with the doctor, he said. More than 4,000 Italian health workers have gotten the virus. 66 doctors have died. There have not been enough masks and other things to protect them. Tommy is the name of the son of a doctor at the hospital. Health workers are not going home after work. They want to avoid spreading the virus to their families. Benelli said that the doctor said at least there's someone that he can call by his son's name. It is a way for the doctor to feel at home, he said. Tommy and the other robot nurses have one more advantage. They do not get tired. After a charge of batteries, they are back at work. Okay, so there's good information in here, but a lot of small details. So I think the most important thing here is that some patients don't like it, and also that one of the other advantages of these robot nurses is that they don't get tired. This last sentence here about the charging. So I'm going to use that as my last sentence here. I'm going to say another important thing about the robot is that it never gets tired and just needs a charge of its batteries. Okay, so that's our kind of last thing that we're going to pull from this paragraph. And if you want to write a final sentence, you can, but I think this is a great summary. So when we go back and read our summary, it says, Tommy, the robot nurse, helps Italian doctors care for coronavirus patients. Tommy helps the doctors and nurses in an Italian hospital because there are many patients with coronavirus. The robot helps doctors and nurses by checking on the patients and allowing the patient to talk to doctors through the robot. The robot allows nurses and doctors to limit the amount of time spent with patients. Another important thing about the robot is that it never gets tired. It just needs a charge of its batteries. Okay, and I mistakenly capitalized that, but that's okay. We can fix it. Okay, so this is a great summary. Someone who read this would know what we read about without having to read it. So that is your purpose there when you are writing a summary, is to get it to the point where you understand what you read, you can write a nice summary, and then you're able to tell somebody else about what you read and they can understand without reading it. So now that we have done that, I think you're ready to summarize whatever you read. And it's been really fun today reading about the robot nurse and writing a summary. And tomorrow and Friday, we're really going to practice that even more. And you're going to do some of that on your own, which is going to be really fun. Thank you so much for paying attention and doing the work. You guys are doing awesome. And it's been really great so far learning about summarizing. So now you can go to your choice board and choose something to do for about 15 minutes. If you haven't done the quizzes or you haven't done the Rags to Riches game, remember, Imagine Learning is always an option. So pick something from the choice board and complete it, and then I will see you tomorrow. All right, bye.